The first season of Tokyo Revengers really caught me off guard. Now, was this in a good way or a bad way? Let's have a look at the review and find out. Okay, so we're gonna first start with the spoiler-free part of the review, and I have to admit, I went into this anime blind, meaning I didn't read the manga in advance. I just jumped into the first season of the anime and experienced the story for the first time. Now, I wasn't having very high expectations, the anime style being what it is, and the basic premise, as far as I had read before I started watching, was not all that very enticing to me. But I must say, this anime really managed to surprise me in a good way, especially as far as the story is concerned, because this story starts out relatively plain, I would say. It starts out with a little twist in the beginning, namely, and this is not a spoiler in any way, with Takemichi being pushed onto, the main character being pushed onto the railway with an oncoming train. Turns out he survived, and he time-leapt. He time-leapt 12 years into the past, into his own body, so his mind was actually transported 12 years into the past during the time when he was still a high school student. So that basic premise, that twist in the beginning, are things we have seen before, I would say. Various series come to mind. Time jumping and time traveling. It has been done before, over and over again. But the interesting part here is that he isn't physically traveling to the past. It's his mind that is being transported to his former self. And his mind from 12 years in the future, so from current day and age, is taking over his body and his actions. So he gets to relive part of his youth with the knowledge of the future. And we later find out that there's a way for him to, without going into spoilers, go back and forth. So he can change things in the past as a high school student and then go back to current or present day and then find out what the effects are of the changes that he did in the past. Now, that in and of itself is an okay setting, a story setting. It's interesting. But what really caught my attention here is, I would say, the camaraderie and the psychological aspect of the story. Now, I know some people look at Takemichi as just a crybaby, and it's true that he cries a lot, I mean really a lot, through the course of this first season. Now, in a sense, I don't mind. For me, it doesn't bother me because he is actually a relatively weak person from the offset, and you can see it in the way his life has shaped up in current day and age. He doesn't have a particularly successful life. He's alone. He doesn't have a girlfriend. He doesn't have a partner. He lives in a small apartment. He actually lives, I wouldn't say a pathetic life, but a very simple, relatively non-exciting life. And I think the sticker of unsuccessful is the one that you can put best on him. So it would make sense that in the past he is the way he is. And what really grabbed my attention is the way, on the one hand, the friendships develop in the series, and also the way how his constant changing of certain aspects in the past impact his future self, and how he seems to be able or unable to change certain things that he really wants to change. So in a sense, it's a hero's journey story. A hero's journey story, not so much focused on fighting an enemy, but more focused on bettering yourself, becoming a better version of yourself. And in that sense, the crybaby aspect didn't bother me all that much, even though I read online that for some people that was a bit of a put-off. in my opinion, it was actually more like making the character relatively realistic in that sense. He's a coward from the offset. He runs away from his problems. But at the same time, he can show a lot of empathy for other people, and in that sense, the crybaby aspect really matches with the character, I would say. And he spoke to me. At times it was irritating, where I was thinking like, dear God, man, get a grip, move forward, better yourself. But then I take a step back and I think like, yeah, well, if I were in his shoes in that situation, would it be all that easy for me to change myself? Would it be all that easy for me to become a better version of who I was as a high school student? And actually, when I think like that, I don't feel as irritated then anymore, and I kind of feel more sympathetic towards his plight. Now, the first season has some jumping back and forth in the time period, and at the end of the first season, actually, the issue that we are presented with in the beginning is not fully resolved yet. And the season actually ends with a huge cliffhanger, making me really looking forward to season 2 to see how the story will continue and pick up. I haven't read the manga in the meantime, but I would say the main character being a crybaby, that's something you're gonna have to get over. But if you give it a chance, if you look at the camaraderie that starts to form around him, that is actually already there and further develops, I would say. The love story aspect, there are some genuine, heartfelt moments in there. If you can overcome that crybaby aspect, I think you have an interesting main character here, an interesting supporting cast as well, and an enticing story that kind of makes you reflect: would you change things if you could go back to your former self and take a different road, perhaps somewhere down the line? So it's an interesting premise with a decent main character and a very interesting supporting cast. Now, as far as the audio is concerned, I think they did a really great job. Sound effects are good. The music is very good as well. I really love the opening and ending themes. They match very well with the anime. And the voice actors themselves, they also do an admirable job of transmitting the necessary emotion, whether it be the main characters or whether it be side characters. I heard and saw a lot of things that I liked. What else can I say? The animation then. Animation-wise, I've read online that some people were disappointed in the animation quality. And I must say I'm a little bit in the middle there. The animation is not horrible at all, but it's relatively simplistic. Simplistic in a sense that we have relative few movement in certain shots, relative little dynamic camera angles, and the drawing style is rather simple, especially as far as the backgrounds are concerned. That is, if I, for example, put Tokyo Revengers next to Kimetsu no Yaiba, Demon Slayer, both stories really grabbed my attention, but animation-wise, I really have to admit Kimetsu no Yaiba is not just one, but a couple of steps higher up the scale as far as quality is concerned. So, yeah, it's a pity. I believe this is a very interesting story. I'm really interested to see where it's going to go, and it deserved a better animation, in my opinion. Now, I don't know for the following seasons if they're going to be able to improve upon that. I would suspect that the quality is going to remain approximately the same, but it would definitely deserve a better animation. This kind of animation style is okay, but it could have elevated the series even further if they were able to pick it up a notch or two. So that's one little point of negativity that I kind of have to admit even though it's not horrible, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it could have been better. Another interesting point that I read, and I'm not going to go into spoilers here still, but some people seem to have an issue, some viewers seem to have an issue with the whole bousouzoku aspect. Now, bousouzoku is Japanese gangs. They're young people usually, often riding motorbikes that are pretty over the top decorated or have very wild attachments or shapes. They like the loud sounds of the engines of those motorbikes, and they usually even wear uniforms that they make themselves or have made, that they design themselves, and they have a flag representing their team, their gang. And well, they try to expand their territory and as such butt heads with other gang members or with other gangs. Now, one of the things that I read online is that some people feel that it's a little bit too unrealistic. The time travel aspect set aside, but the fact that you have these young people in these gangs behaving in such a way that parents don't get involved and such, some people find it unrealistic or too much of a stretch of the imagination. But I have to say, I had a completely opposite reaction. I thought it was really great that we got to see that aspect of Japanese culture, that subculture actually, on the screen with that time travel twist. And it is not as far-fetched as some people would have you believe. Now, some people say that it's very far out or unrealistic, but in my opinion, that's not the case, because I've been to the countryside in Japan many times already. I've spoken to people. I know people who had encounters with such gangs. And even though they're much less prevalent nowadays than they were, let's say, in the 80s or the 90s, they still exist. So bousouzoku, those types of gangs, they still exist, and their behavior in Tokyo Revengers is not far-fetched. This is a bit how they feel. For these young people, their group, the gang they belong to, is the be-all end-all for them. They feel more attached to their teammates than their own family members. And they will indeed butt heads and fight to protect the gang or the territory. The fact that they have their own unique uniforms that they design, their own flag, with their gang name written on it, as we have here, Toman, Tokyo Manjikai. That is actually really picked from reality. That is exactly the way we can see those bousouzoku, those gangs in Japan. So I thought it was quite interesting that we get to see that particular aspect of Japanese culture, but in a sci-fi setting with the time traveling. So yeah, that point of criticism I have to disagree. As far as much as I agree with the fact that the animation could have been better, I disagree with the fact that it's an unrealistic or a natural representation of those young people, because in fact, as far as I'm concerned, it's quite to the point. It's quite on point as far as that subculture is concerned. And the fact that we don't get to see the parents all that much, or not at all, is also not so surprising, because a lot of these young people who are part of such gangs, they often spend the night not at home but at their friend's place. Some of them run away. They don't listen to what their parents tell them, and it might seem very odd for Western audiences when you see that, but this is actually the way of bousouzoku in Japan, and they're delinquents, and that's also the way they translate it normally, bousouzoku as a delinquent. But it's very different than what you have in Western countries. In Western countries, a delinquent will be more individualistic, will be a person who goes on the wrong path, then ends up in situations where they shouldn't end up in, get involved with the law, or get caught. And in Japan, it's more of a group thing. It's a matter of belonging to a certain group and then pledging to that group and being faithful to that group. And that's really well translated in the series here, I think. The uniforms are not far-fetched. The flag that they're carrying, the way they behave towards the leader of the gang is very realistic in my sense. So the moment you see the leader of Toman, of the gang we're gonna follow, when you see their leader, Mikey, when you see him arrive and pass through all the members, you see them bowing, "Otsukarasama!" It's a way of greeting the leader, and it's very typical for how Japanese bousouzoku would behave, in my opinion. The fact that they then go into fist fights and so on, all of that is actually quite on point. So in my opinion, the whole depiction of that subculture was actually well done. It was a plus point of the series for me rather than a negative point. So that's it for the spoiler-free review. I'm going to get a little bit into spoiler territory now for people who have seen the series or a big part of the series. And first thing I have to say is it's really great to see that mix of characters. You have Mikey being the charismatic leader. You have Kisaki, the scheming one, who is very good at using people as puppets. You clearly see that he doesn't make his own hands dirty, but he always is thinking a couple of steps ahead in such a way that sometimes when you see a situation evolve, for example, when Toman was fighting the Headless Angel gang, Valhalla, well, when you see that, Kisaki had put his pawns in such a way that regardless of which team, which bousouzoku gang wins, he's gonna come out on top. If Toman wins, then he can, or as he's already the leader of the third company in the manner of speech of Toman, so he's already relatively high up, and he would have been even higher up had Draken-kun died, but Takemichi was able to prevent that. So he's already positioned himself there as a very important member of Toman. So if Valhalla loses, he can then have Toman take over Valhalla, being the one who negotiated that deal, again reinforcing his position inside Toman. And if the opposite had happened, he could then make it so that Mikey can become the head of Valhalla, and from there usurp or absorb the remaining members of Toman. So regardless how it plays out, he puts his pawns exactly where he wants, and no matter how it turns out, he's going to be the winner, and he's going to be able to get one step closer towards being the absolute leader of the strongest gang in Tokyo. I think that is quite interesting because as smart as he is, Takemichi is just a regular guy, a bit of a coward in the beginning of the series, and he can't think ahead as in such a way as Kisaki does. The only thing that he has is that he can time jump. And that's quite interesting because in a way you see that he changes one important thing, for example the fact that Draken-kun wasn't killed, but when he goes back to the current day, you see that still Kisaki is the head of Toman, that still Draken-kun is on death row, is gonna be executed. You still see that both he and Hina, his girlfriend, are being targeted. So even though he goes to all that trouble to save Draken-kun, he goes back to the present day, and actually not all that much has changed. And that's, in my opinion, because Kisaki is such a fantastic strategist and is so good at planning ahead and thinking multiple steps ahead of everybody else, including Mikey. I think Mikey is a very good fighter, a very charismatic leader, someone people easily look up to and follow, but I think he's not the master strategist that Kisaki is. And that makes Kisaki as a villain so incredibly dangerous. He doesn't get his hands dirty, he doesn't openly attack people, but from behind the curtains, he's positioning his pawns in such a way that he keeps advancing in the direction that he wants to end up being the top of Tolman. Now, and there are a lot of interesting things that I'm still really looking forward to find out in the upcoming seasons. At the end of the season, with the big cliffhanger where he shoots Takemichi in the leg, and then it looks like he's going to kill Takemichi in current day. He says, he also calls him Uchi no Nakimushi hero, our crybaby hero. And you see a tear running along Kisaki's cheek as he's about to shoot or kill Takemichi. So that leads me to believe that inside Tolman a lot of things still happen, and Kisaki didn't always look at Takemichi as an enemy, actually. In fact, he looks at him as some kind of savior, apparently. So what happened there? What made him change his mind and actually aim for Takemichi? There's a lot of things that we still don't know, and there's a lot of things to uncover. What's also very intriguing, in my opinion, is that Mikey is missing in current day. So Tolman has become this huge, well, I would call them almost Yakuza gang, involved in all kinds of activities that Mikey would never have accepted if you look back 12 years ago. And you see that Kisaki is the acting head of the group, but we don't see Mikey, and Mikey seems to be missing, or at least doesn't make any public appearance. So was he shoved aside? Was he kidnapped and or killed maybe, without the other ones knowing? And Kisaki is just acting as the current president, being the second highest in command of Tolman. We don't know. We don't know what happened. Or is Mikey preparing something to have a comeback so he can take out Kisaki? So there's a lot of things that we don't know, and that makes the story very interesting to me. There are so many little aspects, and the jumping back and forth in the timeline, each time changing a little thing, also makes you see a little puzzle piece extra of the entire picture. And I really like that way of storytelling. It's something different than what we're used to. We see the result, but we don't see all the puzzle pieces as to how we got there. And by going back in time and changing one aspect, we start to understand a little bit more each time of the whole picture, the whole story. So definitely a lot of fun stories ahead, I would think. The first season was very good. I really enjoyed it. I watched it almost in one go. It was a binge watch for me, because the story just kept me enthralled. And if I feel like that, if I constantly feel like I want to see the next episode, that's a fantastically good sign. That means that the story writing is really good. And that is, in fact, the strongest part, in my opinion, of this series: the story writing, the bousouzoku aspect, coupled with the sci-fi aspect of time travel. Those two mashed together, it really gives something unique, a unique story that I really enjoy. So if that's something that's your cup of tea, if you like stories like that, sci-fi coupled with those gang stories, is definitely something you need to check out if you haven't yet. And if you have, please let me know in the comments if you enjoyed watching the series, and if you're looking forward to the upcoming seasons. Hope you enjoyed my review. Take care, and see you guys in the next one. Jane! Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, tap the notification bell, and sound off in the comments. And hey, while you're here, why not check out another video?